Then I think about the process as a whole end to end, not just from the perspective of how I want to do it or how the business wants to do it, but taking into account the key contacts with both owners, tenants, or any of those other external stakeholders. So I think one of the challenges that the industry has is we often design processes purely from the point of view of how we want to do it. And any kind of customer experience or customer touches are often just a byproduct of how we want to do that particular job. In actual fact, if you're a truly customer-centric business, it's almost like the reverse is true. So you should start out with any given process. Think about what your key stakeholders want out of that, whether it's the owner, whether it's the tenant. How would they feel? What would they expect you to be able to deliver in this scenario? Get that really clear in your mind, and then work backwards to how are you going to do that process to ensure that you kind of deliver those outcomes to them at that point in time.
Welcome back to another episode of the Property Management Podcast. Thank you so much for having me in your ears. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to ask, have you heard about the PM Accelerate membership yet? It's my very own membership, and inside are all the tools, templates, checklists, workflows, training, processes that I use inside my own real estate business. I've also included a whole Done For You hub, which includes Done For You social media, blogs, newsletters, video scripts, and so much more. It is super affordable, super valuable, and the exact training and support over 6,000 property managers and business owners in my community have been asking for. And whether you're Australian based or based in the UK or US, the tools and trainings inside are for everyone and for every stage of business. Head to the link in the show notes and take a look at what's inside. Now, in this episode, we are going to geek out a bit and talk about workflow and property management software. Now, I wasn't really aware of the differences between a workflow and a process. So let me break down exactly what a workflow is for you. Now, a workflow is a sequence of tasks, steps, or processes used to accomplish a specific goal. It's important because it streamlines work, increases efficiency, reduces errors, and helps in tracking and managing tasks effectively. Seems pretty simple, right? But it can get complicated if you are trying to create them inside your own business, and it can take a lot of time as well. Now, I introduced workflows into my business when I outsourced support with VAs. This created a seamless flow of work between my Australian team and the overseas team, and everyone knew what was expected at each trigger point in the workflow. This created consistency, eliminated a lot of stress, and stopped the finger pointing when something went wrong. It was a game changer, actually. But my guest today, well, he worked out the value of workflow long before me. His name is Brock Fisher, and he is currently the Executive Manager of Industry and Partnerships at property management software company Kolmeo. After a long career as a property manager and BDM, working for companies that managed thousands of properties, he jumped into the tech space when he saw the value and potential Kolmeo offered, along with its point of difference to other software products on the market with the workflow element. So what is Kolmeo? Well, Kolmeo is revolutionizing property management, and it helps to streamline your workflow, automate daily tasks, and communicate directly with your clients, all in the one place. Their product is rethinking how things get done to reduce stress and save you time on those pesky to-dos. With their platform, it tracks everything for you and lets you know what you need to do next, not the other way around. And it's also mobile friendly, so you can work while you're on the road as well. But enough about Kolmeo from me. I want you to take a listen to Brock's story and the valuable insights into the future of property management that he shares. So take a listen. Brock, thank you so much for joining me on the Property Management Podcast. Now, before we dive in, can you share with our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started doing what you're doing now?
Thanks, Kylie. Great to be here. Appreciate the invite to join your podcast. So my name is Brock Fisher. I'm Executive Manager of Industry and Partnerships at a property software company called Kolmeo. that's kind of off the back of, I guess, 2 decades of property management, real estate experience. So my real estate journey started kind of by accident, like so many people's have, back in 1998, actually, in Central West New South Wales. So I'd finished high school. I was busily dodging going to university. Really know what I was going to do with my life. Found myself in an interview at Rain and Horn in Bathurst and became a sales assistant there. So after a year of putting up the best signs and taking the best photos on actual film in Bathurst, one of the ladies that worked at Rain and Horn Bathurst was a lady by the name of Michelle Delaney. So Michelle was quite influential in property management circles. And after her moving out of Bathurst, managed quite a few offices in the Hunter Valley for Ray White, and then became a corporate Ray White representative, running property management for the franchise for quite a few years. So Michelle was very influential in property management and convinced me to join the team as a leasing consultant. So I started leasing properties, then progressed through property management roles and into senior property manager roles there. I was there for 5.5 years, having a great time. Then my girlfriend at the time, who was now my wife, decided that she was going to move to Queensland. So I thought, hey, why not? I'm up for a bit of an adventure. So I actually started a job at Ray White Ascot in probably around 2003 and started the rent roll at Ray White Ascot, working pretty closely with Dwight Ferguson, who's a really good guy, high performing principal in the network. And in fact, Damon Warwick is now the selling principal at Ray White Ascot, was actually working as a leasing consultant at the time when we were in property management way back then, kind of 20 years ago. So had a business development and kind of department head role there, did that for quite a number of years, then actually transitioned to on-site management for a period of time. So that was quite an interesting contrast, I guess, when you're kind of living among all of the tenants and the people that you're managing on a day-to-day basis. I was actually working for a Brisbane family who had quite a significant private property holding, so much so that they could just engage their own property manager rather than, have their couple of hundred properties managed in a traditional sense. So really enjoyed that role, actually, and really enjoyed working with the family. We're still in touch today and I kind of still feel like I'm part of that family. But curiosity about career paths kind of got the better of me there, and I actually made a couple of pretty shocking career choices off the back of that in close succession. But the silver lining to that was in 2011, I actually ended up in a business called Rental Express in Brisbane, which people who have been around the business for quite a while might recall. And that was a really exciting trajectory because it was quite a large-scale, fast-growth business. I originally joined that business to kind of work on what we called at the time the independent business owner kind of business structure. And that was basically a structure where, as a property manager, I had a share in the asset value of my portfolio and I could grow it and therefore grow the value of my business. And then I would get paid a percentage of the revenue generated by that portfolio. So that was kind of, I guess, an early iteration of a model that Jody Staten later took to market and made quite famous, and that we see sometimes in what we kind of call a supported sole trader model now, where you've got businesses like Agents Agency and Benex and those sorts of people who provide operational kind of overhead support for people to run their own sort of solo micro businesses. So that was a really great initiative. I was able to move from that into a training role and then later into a role as Chief Operations Officer at Rental Express. And because of the scale that we had and the fact that I benefited from working with a lot of really forward-thinking minds in that business, I got to do a lot of cool things probably wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So worked extensively with offshore assistants. So I grew a team in the Philippines from 2 people to about 80 people over a period of 7 years, providing 55 or 60 different process support functions to our frontline service providers in the Australian team. It was a business heavily involved in NPS and customer satisfaction and customer experience metrics. So was heavily involved in the progression of that program from originally something that we did on SurveyMonkey and a whole bunch of complicated spreadsheets with formulas and stuff, to working with an enterprise grade piece of software called Custom Gauge, where we worked on a bespoke trigger point based surveying program so that as we completed particular processes in the business, that would trigger a survey to go out to owners and to tenants. And that gave you a great level of really detailed insight into that. So the Rental Express journey was really quite a career shaping one for me. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a small shareholding in that business and become a shareholder. We were purchased in 2015, I think, by the Little Group. So as part of that transaction, I then moved into the Little real estate business and basically continued to do what I was doing from an operational and tech and system support and customer engagement perspective, but on a broader scale. So when I left the little real estate business in 2019, we're up to about 23,000 properties under management at that time. And because I'd spent so much of the previous 10 years working pretty heavily with the tech stack in the business, then the opportunity to move into Kolmeo and be more heavily involved in property management software was quite an appealing one. So that's kind of the role I play on the team at Kolmeo is around that domain expertise piece. Like, I'm not a programmer, I don't punch out code or do any of that type of stuff, but it's all about context and working with our product owners and designers on, how people will use what they're building and what the problems are that they're trying to solve.
What a journey. That is amazing. And you don't see too many men in property management, especially back then when you were starting. So how did you find it being around, just an off the cuff question, but how did you find it being around all of that female energy when you were starting out? If you are anything like me, you think you know your rent roll numbers. Well, I thought I did until I had a rent roll health check, and I was quite literally shocked. The money I was leaving on the table was astounding, and this is not something that I'm proud to admit. There were missed management fees, let fees, advertising, and lease renewal fees not being charged, and properties even without bonds. And all of this was happening despite monthly audits being conducted in my business. So how did I uncover all these gaps in my valuable income? Well, I had a rent roll due diligence from my good friend Tazi, aka the Rent Roll Queen and founder of the Tazi Way, a specialist in rent roll due diligence, business valuation and management rights. The Tazi Way is the innovative force driving the real estate industry. With 25 years of business and real estate acumen, they find gaps and risks in your agency to find undiscovered value. If you'd like to book your business in for a rent roll due diligence, head to the link in the show notes and mention That Property Mum for a 10% discount.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's got a couple of different elements to it. I think, first aspect is, you rightly point out that property management is traditionally a female-dominated profession, and that males tend to gravitate towards the glory and the shiny lights of sales. And I guess from a peer pressure point of view, that was a constant probably throughout the first 10 years of my career, that everyone would go, "Oh, when are you going to move into sales?" And I just kind of found it an irritation that people thought that property management was just a stepping stone. Like, I thought, well, why couldn't property management be its own rewarding career path? And
Love that.
so I also find that the attraction to me of property management is its team environment, whereas from a sales point of view, it's basically every person for themselves. Like, everyone is basically out to do their own thing and get their own deals together. And, there's this kind of thin facade of camaraderie, but it's really not that deep because everyone kind of has their own motives and agendas. So I can do sales. I've been a successful BDM in the past. Like, I've got those skills, but I just don't necessarily like doing it all the time, because I find it's quite repetitive and you're having lots of the same styles of conversations over and over again. Like, it's pretty much a never ending cycle of going out, talking to people, objection handling, negotiation, going through the marketing process, getting deals done, and then kind of repeating times 300. So, I enjoyed it when I did it, but I never wanted to do it forever. And I certainly never wanted to move into the sales side of business, because I valued the camaraderie of the team in the property management side of things. And I just became more fascinated with the operational challenges, and that's kind of where so many of my interests lie. So that's kind of the path I wanted to go down. But yeah, definitely in that first 10 years, the notable points were, so many people just would always assume that you were just in property management for a short period of time before you embarked on a sales career. And, the churn rate in sales is probably even higher than in property management. Like, it's not like everyone is making a killing out of sales. It's a tough grind and there's a lot of repetition there. But I think from a gender perspective, even back in my school days, I was kind of always just one of the girls anyway. So, it didn't really phase me at all. Pretty much constantly working with women for most of my life, because, I grew up with sisters and I just find it kind of relatable.
Beautiful. Love it. Let's move on to the topic of today's discussion, and that is the concept of workflow. And I've been working with workflow in my own business for a few years now. So please explain to anyone listening how the concept of, workflow can reduce that chaos and stress and ultimately save lots of time.
Yeah, well, there's a few different elements to it. I guess when we talk about workflow, we're kind of talking about the processes that you do in your business and how you do them, and the manner in which you kind of surface that information to everyone that needs to do their particular part of that puzzle. So there's a couple of key points. I guess I think of it in terms of um, first thing you need is a trigger point, like what is going to happen that is going to start a workflow of any different kind. So whether that's a lease renewal, a vacating tenant workflow, any of those types of things. Is there a trigger point? What is that trigger point? And can it be automated so that people don't kind of have to remember to do it? So that's kind of the first key point. Then I think about the process as a whole end to end, not just from the perspective of how I want to do it or how the business wants to do it, but taking into account the key contacts with both owners, tenants, or any of those other external stakeholders. So I think one of the challenges that the industry has is we often design processes purely from the point of view of how we want to do it. And any kind of customer experience or customer touches are often just a byproduct of how we want to do that particular job. In actual fact, if you're a truly customer centric business, it's almost like the reverse is true. So you should start out with any given process. Think about what your key stakeholders want out of that, whether it's the owner, whether it's the tenant. How would they feel? What would they expect you to be able to deliver in this scenario? Get that really clear in your mind, and then work backwards to how are you going to do that process to ensure that you kind of deliver those outcomes to them at that point in time. So there's a bit there about process design and how you're going to deploy that in your business. Ultimately, what you want to achieve out of that is the ability to remove variability and to have repeatability in your business, because from a property management point of view, we want to set a really high and consistent level of customer service. And you can only kind of get that if you are consistent in what you deliver. So there's so many challenges presented by bringing a whole bunch of people together, each that have their own way of wanting to do things, because then you have, a really big variation in what experience your owners and tenants are getting on the receiving end of that. So it's important as a business to be clear on what you stand for and what your service standards should be and how you want to do a particular thing, and then design processes in a way that ensures that people are delivering to that level and to that benchmark. Because we rely so heavily on referral business and rent roll growth through organic introduction, and that can't be a person specific experience. So if someone has a great experience with your property manager and that person refers a friend and they're dealing with a different property manager in your business, it's important that they're getting that same level of experience. Otherwise, they're going to look at the person that referred them in and go, "What are you talking about? This is actually being quite garbage." So consistency and repeatability and removing the variability from the service thing that you offer. But the other key point about this is really important, is around onboarding. So as you're recruiting new team members, we all know that churn is a real big problem in property management, and it's probably only getting worse as opposed to better. So there's a whole range of moving parts around successfully onboarding new team members, but certainly one of those key parts is having clearly defined workflows that people find easily to follow. So think a lot about this concept of time to competency. How long does it take people to get up to speed when they join your business, and how are you facilitating that to be, an effective and easy and straightforward journey? And that's not just about workflow. It's about the tech stack that you're using, how easy it is for people to get stuff done. But yeah, there's no doubt that the overall concept of workflows is really in that piece.
That is great advice there. And I just want to go back and maybe touch a little bit more on how somebody could get started implementing workflow into their business. Because one of the biggest issues that I have in my business is I like to think that I'm customer centric and I have my processes in place. But you're right, when you onboard new team members into your business, if I wasn't doing the onboarding process and I wasn't doing the training, then there's a lot of things that got missed and overlooked and not passed on. And then I would be calling somebody out and saying, "Hey, why didn't you do this?" And I was never shown that. I was never taught that. Where I think workflow is really will eliminate a lot of that, confusion over what is expected. But if you're going to build in workflow into your business, you kind of mentioned that going back to your, what you want your business to stand for, what its values are. Is that the starting place for building workflows? And how would somebody go about, maybe share a bit of an example of how they could build a workflow in, say, onboarding a new client or something like that? If you're ready to be a super organised, focused and productive property manager, buckle up because Kolmeo is about to revolutionise the way that you work. Kolmeo is the driving force behind property management excellence in residential real estate. Now picture this, a comprehensive end-to-end system designed to be the beating heart of your property management tasks, manage your properties, owners and tenants, and handle payments, inspections, and even marketing listings without leaving the platform. Kolmeo is designed to be an all-in-one solution to all your property management needs. And here's the game changer. Kolmeo isn't just software. It's been awarded the most innovative prop tech scale up in 2023. Yes, you heard it right. Kolmeo has been recognised for their groundbreaking approach to property management software. How good is that? So property managers, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, dive into the future of property management with Kolmeo. You can book in a demo with the team today and go in their weekly draw for a Prezi gift card worth $100. All you need to do is to head to the link kolmeo.com/thatpropertymum, and Kolmeo is Kolmeo.
All right. So I think there's probably tips around how to do it manually and tips around how to do it digitally. But I guess it kind of all depends on what tools you have at your disposal now. So if you don't use a system that has comprehensive inbuilt workflow and you're not using an external digital workflow tool, perhaps you might have something like a procedure manual in your business or anything like that. Now, I'm a guy that likes detail and I like clarity, but I think procedure manuals across the course of many decades have proven to be dust collecting white elephants in property.
Absolutely.
So lots of people invest so much time in writing a 400-page manual that no one ever reads, and it sits on the shelf and gathers dust, and it's hard to keep updated, and it's not agile, and if you want to change the way you do things, it's very complicated. So the underlying problem there is it's just difficult to consume. Like, people are busy, they don't have time to sit down and read through 400 pages. So
not everyone learns that way either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I've found it's a lot more successful in the past just using simple flowcharts. Like, people just want a one-page guide on how do I do a particular thing. So if for all of your key processes, bearing in mind, always things happen in property management that you haven't seen before. But there's a fair bit of repetition involved, and most businesses will have maybe 10 or 20 primary things that they do all the time. So that's kind of where you focus your efforts, because it's the classic Pareto principle where 80% of the value is in 20% of kind of those sorts of things. So if you've got your primary processes sorted and you've got a simple, easy to read flowchart that guides people through from start to finish what's expected, then that's a great way to move forward if you don't have a digital tool to kind of help. Now, when you're working out what your process flowchart should look like, that's a good opportunity to figure out if you actually have consistency in your processes now or not, because this helps you in so many other ways as well. Like, if you want to look at using offshore assistance or any of those sorts of types of ways to gain more efficiency and free up your property manager's time, the first thing you need if you're looking at an offshoring model is clear processes. And so many conversations I've had with business owners for years revolve around the fact that, we've got processes, no worries. And then you go and talk to 3 different property managers about how they do a particular thing and you get 3 different answers. So just working through that process of flowcharting your primary processes is really important to discover if everyone kind of is on that same wavelength. But then once you have your process, you can then think more about that customer piece. So ideally, if you're starting everything from scratch, you want to think about what touch points your customers or tenants want out of that whole experience first, and then kind of work back to a process. But that takes time. So if you've got a clearly defined process that everyone can sit around and review, then you can think, okay, well, based on how I'm doing this process, if I'm an owner, am I really getting what I want out of that? Like, is that the type of correspondence I have? Is that the conversation I want to be having? Is that the frequency I want to be kept up to date? And if it's not, then you can kind of adjust your flowchart and work those steps in. Same with the tenant. Now, I think automation is really popular in our industry, but so often we automate in reverse. Like, we automate the initial moments where we could be building a relationship or adding a value, and then we only jump on the phone or follow up people in person if they haven't responded to a series of automated prompts. Now, in reality, I think the reverse is the better way to do that, where your initial chance to jump on the phone or add value or, create a wow moment with the customer or actually just have a conversation and understand where they're at before you take the next step saves people a whole lot of downstream effort because you're not fruitlessly following up stuff that's kind of irrelevant. So if you send out something automated to a tenant and it's about a lease renewal or something like that, and and they already know that they're not going to renew, but you just haven't asked them, and then you subsequently follow them up about the lease renewal 4 or 5 times, like that just annoys them, and it's just a waste of time for you. Whereas if you just got on the phone to begin with and went, "Hey, you staying or going?" and they were like, "Hey, we're going," then you can go, "Cool, we'll just cut straight to that chase," and then you can kind of help them with the vacate coaching. Do you need us to help you move house? All of that type of stuff, rather than just kind of having your blinkers on about this is a lease renewal, bam, 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 and that's overall a better customer experience. So that's kind of the manual side of things. The digital steps are kind of like working your flowcharts into a checklist within your program. So if you've got a program that supports that sort of workflow management, then ideally for each of your primary processes, you're setting up that workflow so that each time it gets triggered, your checklist populates, people have a task there that they can work through, check it off, make notes as they go. If you use an external workflow program, then those same sorts of steps are required. But before you can set up all your digital tools, kind of need to have your analog processes sorted as well. So I think those initial team conversations around flowcharts are a good way to start because involving the team in that process also enhances their level of engagement and buy-in with that. Whereas if you just roll in as a team leader and go, "Hey, here's how we're doing it all now," then you're kind of just imposing your will on the team, which means that their likelihood of them embracing that is going to be a lot less than if they feel they've been heard and included in that kind of series of process designs.
Have you got some digital tools for workflow or the flow charts that you can share with us, apart from obviously Kolmeo, which we will get into talking about in a minute?
Yeah, so within Kolmeo, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this shortly, we have configurable checklists for all of the workflows, and that is done by the system administrator, so you can set up your own processes in there. Yeah, I do. I have flowcharts available from some of my old process stuff because when I first started our journey with offshore assistance, we needed to kind of go through that process design scenario. So yeah, I do definitely still have some flowcharts around for that if you would like.
Oh, thank you. Well, I can vouch for that. I have got offshore support and I had the old 400-page process manual gathering dust on my shelf. But once we did get offshore help, the flowcharts and the workflows have been a game changer inside my business. And it has delivered all of those things that you mentioned, better consistency for the team. Everybody knows what they're doing, happier clients because it is the same process. There's no cowboys out there. And if there is cowboys out there, or cowgirls, we pull them back in by the reins and we've got something to go back to. No one can say that they weren't trained or they weren't shown because it's actually on a workflow, on a chart in front of them that they, can pull up anytime if they're confused about what's the next step. So I really love that. And I'm a bit of a tech and software geek as well. And I love learning about all the new stuff that's coming and it's changing so quickly and all the new AI stuff that's coming out. Tell us a little bit about Kolmeo's journey and how you guys got started, where the idea came from, and how it is different to the other property management software providers out there. There's been so much talk of stress, overwhelm, and burnout in property management lately. Do you want to know how I overcame all of that? Yes, I hit rock bottom multiple times, but I got myself a virtual assistant. Actually, not just one, but 3. But I didn't just get any VA, I got a PMVA. What are they? Well, they are the most well-trained in the business. And not only that, you also have a backup VA. So that essentially your business is never without admin support ever again. And my health, time and business has never looked back. Your PMVA can take care of tasks like rent arrears, lease preparation and renewals, maintenance follow-up, routine inspection bookings, data entry, audits, prospecting, inbox management, and so much more. And the best part of implementing a PMVA in my business was that it freed up my time and my team's time to take care of important things like customer service. What makes me feel so safe is that PMVA is owned by Tiffany Botel, both here and in the Philippines, making my data secure and giving me more control over the VA arrangement. So head to the link in the show notes to book in your discovery call with Lady Boss Tiff.
Okay, so there is actually a bit of a history lesson here, so just bear with me for a moment. The origins of Kolmeo are actually in an older server-based program called Agent Plus. So Agent Plus was a program that came to be in about 2006 when Run Property Management were kind of the original large-scale property management business that floated on the stock exchange, aggregated a whole bunch of rent rolls, and got real big real fast. Now, at that point in time, we were still very much in traditional server-based property management software, and most of the off-the-shelf offerings at the time were just not suitable for large-scale businesses. They just simply didn't have the capacity. And even thinking back to the Rental Express days, even at about 3,500 properties on the old Console Gateway program, it was a scenario where the last person that was working in the office had to start the backup as they left, and it would run all the way overnight, and you just had to hope that it was finished by the time the first person came in day, because as you know, you couldn't do any work while the backups were happening. And, sometimes that didn't happen, or the backups failed or whatever, and then you have to go, oh, we lose a whole day of productivity, or do we run the backup again? Like, what's the higher risk? And in between all of that, platform crashes and so on and so forth. So what Run became acutely aware of back then is that off-the-shelf products would work for their scale aspirations, and they had to find a better solution. So they went to market and found a platform called Remedy, which was actually the Remedy Action Request System, which was a workflow system specifically designed for large-scale, multi-office, multi-location, kind of even international types of businesses that had, complex help desks and all of that type of stuff. So it was a system rich with kind of those large-scale enterprise features in terms of timestamping, audit trails, the fact that a piece of work could move around for multiple people and departments, and everyone always what everyone had done on that. And so they spent a fair bit of money customizing that platform into a suitable tool to do property management with, and that was what the Agent Plus product was. When the Little Group, when Paul Little bought Run Property and delisted it and it became a private entity, he got the Agent Plus program, that transaction. So Agent Plus was originally built for that purpose, but then they realized it was a great program for scale and lots of people wanted a big rent roll. So it was made available for other businesses. And when I was at Rental Express, we were, I think, one of the first external customers onto the Agent Plus platform. So I think the defining difference is that when you consider the roots of Agent Plus versus other traditional property management software, other property management software kind of started as accounting programs, and then they had a bit of workflow stuff added on later, whereas Agent Plus started as a workflow program first and had the accounting added to it after that. So what we sought to do with Kolmeo, because we needed to move that Agent Plus experience from a server-based program and into the cloud, because, it was 2020 after all, was to kind of harness what we would think of as the legacy strengths and the things that people really liked about Agent Plus. Don't replicate the things that used to frustrate me, and there were some of those, let me tell you. And then also kind of have a bit of a fresh general overview and strategy about what we wanted to do and what we wanted to be as a software program. So I think the primary difference in Kolmeo at the market, in market right now, is firstly, as I mentioned, we're kind of workflow first, so all about how we get the job done. We really understand the unique needs of large-scale property management businesses, because not only is that what our prior program was designed for, but so many people at Kolmeo have spent considerable periods of time in these large-scale businesses as well. And so with that, we've always been heavily focused on the workflow aspect. We really want to build a platform that allows people to be more efficient and complement what they do. Like, we're not about replacing the property manager or getting rid of the intermediary at all. We really value the role that the property manager plays in that. But we understand the job is tough, take a lot of time, people are under stress, people are under pressure. And I'm quite a detail-focused person. So, I look at, if you're a property manager and you do 30 things a day and you can save 2 minutes doing each of them, then all of a sudden that's an extra hour a day. So I think the misconception with efficiency when property managers are confronted with this change management scenario is, if my boss wants me to be more efficient, he just wants me to do more work. But sometimes your boss actually just wants you to do less work. So if you can do everything you want to do in a day and you can do it in an hour less, that can be the difference between you having a lunch break and not, being able to leave on time or not, being able to go and pick up the kids perhaps from school, because everything is kind of done. But outside of the individual, the way that extrapolates from an efficiency perspective across the business, when I was at Little Real Estate Business, we had over 200 property managers. So if you're saving 200 people 1 hour every single day, that's 200 hours a day in efficiency that you're saving across the whole business. That's 5 working weeks. And that has a really big impact on, do you need to add additional staff? Because staff, are obviously a very expensive thing from a business point of view. Businesses often struggle with profitability. It's a big cost to kind of have. So when you start considering the impacts of these little incremental efficiency improvements, they really do add up, not just for the person, but certainly for the business.
And so tell me a little bit more about then some of the differences between some of the other platforms out there, because I like the fact when I had a demo that I could just jump on and pretty much my day is planned out for me. It's everything's sitting there that I've got to follow up or that I need to do. It's like a to-do list built into the platform, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So basically everything that you do in property management, Kolmeo, is done in what's called a request. So a request is like a task, but I guess it's much more fully featured. So we have requests that you can create yourself for different process types, and we have a whole lot of automatically triggered requests. So things like lease renewal requests are generated based on the lease dates that you put in the system at the beginning, and they trigger at a preset time before that expires. Because we want to automate and digitize as much of that as possible, so you don't kind of have to think about it, and so it just pops up in your to-do list when it's time to start taking action. So the idea of a request is for everything that you do, everything related to that process is kept within that request. So you can merge documentation from a request, you can merge email correspondence from a request, you can send SMSs from a request. You can also drop and drag everything back into that request as well: photos, forms, letters, anything that's been sent to you, emails. So for every process that you do, everything related to that process stays within that request always, and that just builds a really powerful library over time. So from a manager's point of view, if you've had a complaint about something that happened 2 years ago, then you can just go back through the property, look at the request, and straight away you've got everything in it. Doesn't matter if that team member has departed or anything. It's just a really nice and powerful way to organize work. Now, that's helped me over the years in so many different ways, from a manager's point of view, but also as a property manager, I really loved it as well, because I did manage portfolios on that same sort of basis. And it was really a game changer for me. But we're just in the process of working in even more features into our request now. So you can snooze a request. So the way a request looks on your screen is basically everything that you need to do today should be there for you. You work through that, and then you either complete that task or you snooze it off to the following day or next week or next month or whenever you need to take that next step. So when you are looking at your screen in Kolmeo, it's basically what you need to do today. People basically then just kind of work through it, get it back to zero. And that's kind of how it works. So we're enhancing a request now by adding configurable checklists to the request. So as a way to kind of guide team members on how you want to get things done. But also, as we kind of discussed earlier, for your newer team members or people that you're going through the process of onboarding, you've got those visual prompts there for them to work through. So a system administrator or a general manager or a department head can configure all of the different types of checklists that you want to have for all of the different processes that you do. When you generate a request of that type of process, then the checklist automatically populates. Your team member works through that. They check it off as they go. And if they try and skip a step, they've got to put a reason in as to why they want to skip that step. And they also can't close the request off until everything is done in it. So they've either got to have ticked it and done it, or selected not applicable and put in the reason why it's not applicable, and then they kind of close that task. So it's really helpful in the pursuit of uniformity of how you do things in your business, but also making sure that people are consistent in what they do and that people aren't skipping steps. Because, the system basically doesn't allow them to.
That's great. Great transparency, which is one of the issues that in the past a lot of business owners and property managers and teams have had, is as soon as somebody leaves, you start uncovering all these things that haven't been done, all the little secrets that have been stashed away, which ends up causing nightmares and losses of management. So I really love that transparency element as well. And talk about, so say somebody's already using one of the other platforms and they wanted to come over to Kolmeo. Obviously, you can, migrate all the data across, and, how hard or difficult is it to, because it is different to other platforms. So how hard is it to switch, your head or your mind? I'm a creature of habit. I don't like change. So
Yeah.
for me, it would be a big deal to change, just, even though it is all the pluses, still for me, I have that fear around change. So talk us through that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different elements to it. I guess so from a practical point of view, from a migration and replatforming perspective, we're fortunate enough to have done two largest platform remigrations that have ever happened in Australia. So we have a lot of experience with working with businesses, particularly large scale businesses, and we have a complete program and suite of tools, resources, processes just around that whole replatforming piece, including all of the stakeholder management with owners, tenants, team members, the learning, all of that type of stuff. So, that is all well covered. I think the greater conversation is around why people want to change. So I think it's important to be dissatisfied with your existing arrangement before you think about change. Like if you really love everything about your existing tech stack and how it works and there's no problem for you, then there's no point in changing to anything. But if you are experiencing challenges, and I guess a lot of the conversations we have with customers kind of have a few similar themes. One is that the most popular common off-the-shelf property management products don't necessarily cater to larger scale businesses that well. So the typical real estate business in Australia has, as per all of the Macquarie benchmarking, generally varies somewhere around about that 400 property mark. And the existing products in market kind of cater well to that type of scenario. So there might be a few little annoyances around it, but you're generally not experiencing enough annoyance on enough scale for it to be a big enough irritation for you to go out and kind of have a look at other options. But if you get to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 plus, these kind of challenges become a lot more pronounced. And that's when we find a lot of people are sort of looking at options for a whole range of reasons. One is consolidation and simplification of the tech stack. So the hub and spoke model in property management is quite popular now, but it also has a whole lot of drawbacks, particularly the bigger you get, the harder it gets. So having a core operating system with 10 or 15 bolted on scenarios gives you good individual solutions to a lot of individual problems, but it also presents problems of its own in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's the complexity of the tech stack to begin with and how people can kind of learn that. There's the cost of it. So for every subscription and add-on product you have, you're additionally paying for that. So you're escalating your operational costs. There's a real customer experience angle to it as well. So if you're an owner and a tenant and the business you're dealing with wants you to have an app for maintenance, different app to go and look at payment stuff, and a different app to check out your lease renewal details and all that type of stuff, and you're going to 3 or 4 different spots, then the likelihood that you're having a fun time is lower and your engagement with that business is also likely to be lower. I mean, people just want kind of one spot to go where they can have all of the information that they want. But there's also that real user experience thing as well. So you're constantly going into and out of a whole range of different programs. You've got a whole lot of windows open. It impacts your ability to be kind of productive and mobile. So we're big into flexible work, and our mobile app allows you to do just about as many things as you can do on your PC back in the office. So there's a whole range of challenges that come with that hub and spoke model. Some people love the hub and spoke model. If you love it, you should definitely keep it. If you are starting to kind of experience frustrations around that whole complexity, the cost, the user experience, the customer experience, then a platform like Kolmeo is a good option to have a look at. So we, as much as possible, want to be quite a broad platform that minimizes but doesn't remove the need for add-on services. So, we do have several integrations that we have with partners, but I think it's important to understand that not all integrations are created equal. So the typical concept of an API and a public API basically involves two different companies giving as little information as possible to make sure that each side of that stuff works. And so you end up with silos of information. You end up with kind of muted functionality, I guess, because not all information is moving one side and the other. And also you end up with a scenario where if you want to stop using a particular tool, you've got all of your information and IP locked away in that. And can you even bring that back into your primary native operating system? So These are some of the challenges that people have with that hub and spoke model. But I guess to circle back to your original point around change, like change is hard for everyone. You got to be changing for the right reasons. The hardest thing in the world to do is change when you're already really happy with what you're doing. Like if you're really happy with what you're doing, I would advise you to just keep doing it. But if you are experiencing some of the frustrations that I've spoken about, then yeah, that's when we could have a chat and be of assistance.
I will include a demo inside my property management membership PM Accelerate, and I'll also include in the show notes links to book in directly with your team as well to have a bit of a demo there as well. Now, I love personal development, and I am assuming you are very similar given your history and your love of tech and software. You've got to, do lots of learning around and growth around that. So can you share a tool, a resource, a podcast, something that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about a couple of books that I've found really impactful throughout my journey. And like so many people in property management, I found myself in a situation where I was moved into leadership roles, but had absolutely no idea what leadership was. There are a lot more tools and people and training courses around kind of in the modern day to help in that regard, thankfully, but it's symptomatic of many people's journey, not only my own, that people are technically very good at a role and they get elevated into leadership. And leadership is very different to being technically great at doing a particular thing. Like it's a very different skill set. So there's three things that I've found particularly impactful for me. The first is a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It's actually quite an old book, but it's an oldie but a goodie. So it talks about three primary kind of four aspects of management: 1 minute praisings, 1 minute goal setting, 1 minute reprimands. Reprimand is a very kind of emotive term, so it's not as, I guess, conflict laden as that word would have you believe. But one of the key aspects that it talks about is this concept of management by walking around. So being out there on the floor with your team, and in particular, catching them doing stuff right so that you can praise them. So often people move into a management role and they're just intent on finding anything that anyone's doing incorrectly and correcting it. And they don't actually, for the moment, to give praise. And I think that's actually a much more powerful way to lead and to build rapport with your team. So the 1 minute manager is great. Lots of transferable skills in there, and it's a short read. So, I have it on audio. You can listen under an hour, like if you're on a plane flight or anything like that. The second book is one by Patrick Lencioni. So Patrick is a pretty high-profile American consultant and coach in that whole leadership and business kind of cohesiveness space. It's a book that's called The Truth About Employee Engagement. Now, it actually used to be called 3 Signs of a Miserable Job, but I think over a period of time, people found that quite a confronting title. So I actually renamed it to be The Truth About Employee Engagement. But the good thing about Patrick is he has a very light method of writing a book. Like it's not very heavy, hard language. It's kind of light, entertaining fable style. So he tells, the key messages in the story format, which I find quite relatable. But it talks about anonymity, measurement, and irrelevance as being 3 underpinning factors of every person in every job and every role. It doesn't matter if you're the janitor. It doesn't matter if you're mowing grass. It doesn't matter if you're part of a leadership team. These are the 3 core underlying elements that everyone needs in order to feel engaged in what they do. So once again, that's a really short read and quite impactful. A third book that I find quite amazing in a lot of different ways is also by Patrick Lencioni, and it's called The Advantage. So that talks more about team dynamics and cohesiveness and how to have constructive debate and get the best out of everyone in the room. It talks about all of the common problems that teams have and how to kind of get over that. So between those 3 books, I think there's a lot of nuggets of gold in there. If you haven't read them, get onto it. If you're into that scenario where you've just become a manager and you're kind of looking at where to turn for that sort of info, then I think that's 3 really good places to start.
Thank you so much for sharing. I will include links for those in my show notes as well. Now, how can our audience connect with you further?
Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. If you get me on Instagram, all you see is mountain bikes and food. But hey, if you like that, then cool, jump on there. You can email me at Kolmeo. It's just brock.fisher@kolmeo.com, or mobiles 0418 823 519.
And tell me before we sign off, how soon after the end of November is that moustache going?
I've got lunch with some people on Friday, which is the 1st of December, so I might leave it on for that, but it'll be going pretty quickly afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, a little birdie told me that your wife's happy for it to go?
Yeah, she's not a super fan. I mean, obviously she supports the Movember initiative and what it's all about, but yeah, she prefers a cleanly shaven face, that's for sure.
Brock, thank you so much for joining me and taking time out of your busy schedule today.
Thank you for the invite. Really appreciate it.
One thing I dread doing is chasing up rent arrears and debt collection. It takes up valuable time and it can often lead to conflict. But it is a necessary evil when you are running a property management business. But there is an easier way to make sure your tenants' rent is paid on time and in advance, and it's called RentPay. RentPay is a secure and simple to use payment platform that saves agents time and money with fast, accurate receipting while making life better for renters. To top it all off, you'll never have to worry about dishonor fees or unknown deposits again. How good is that? Cleared funds are deposited straight into your bank account in a single daily payment with accurate receipting and reference numbers auto-assigned, and it's fully compatible with all trust accounting systems. It's a super flexible payment option for tenants who can pay rent in multiple ways, including direct debit, credit card, or instantly pay with Payer ID. Fees are minimal, and RentPay even helps with the rent arrears process by automating reminders to renters when payments are due or missed. If you are currently paying large bank fees, struggling with constant dishonors because the funds aren't cleared when their funds land in your trust, or wasting time chasing up unknown payments, I encourage you to book in a free demo with RentPay and give yourself and your renters an easier way to pay rent. Can I ask you a quick favour before you leave this episode? Now, we all know how important reviews are for businesses these days, and mine is no different. If you could spare just a minute to follow, rate and review this podcast, it would mean a lot to me. In fact, what would get me super excited is if you share this podcast with someone in the industry who you think might need to hear some of the episodes right now. And if you'd like to find out more about working with me or any of the products I have to help you start, grow or scale your property management business, head to my website, thatpropertymum.com.au, or check out the links in the show notes.